Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's the complete opposite in the equity market, which is actually, I think, stronger, makes a stronger statement. In the equity market, you have massive insider selling, and the big money, the insiders over the last 4 weeks, the institutional have sold 4.2 billion last week. Over the last 4 weeks, 2 billion per week, as the insiders are at, or excuse me, as the retail mom and pop are at the largest amount of. They're all in on stocks, and that says something, I think, about where the direction of the stock market may be going. The insiders know the scoop. Well, look at the same thing in reverse with the metals market, the biggest money in the world. The central banks, the sovereign wealth funds, the family offices, they are draining the world's exchanges, as you know, standing for delivery. The largest delivery in the history of the COMEX market, I believe, in both gold and silver occurred in May. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure it did. $1 billion worth of gold was delivered in May, about 4.5 in March. The biggest money in the world is accumulating gold and standing for delivery. And the odd thing about it, to your point, is that the retail investor is immersed in the risk-on trade, immersed in traditional, equities and the traditional form of investing. And you have to wonder, if the insiders are massively selling, but it's the opposite in gold and silver, who's going to be right? And my guess is those closest to the information are right. And that to me is very telling. But yeah, you're right. The people on this side of the table in precious metals are missing out what's happening. And that's why we see the lowest premiums we've seen really in a very long time on metals. It's a lack of demand on the retail side more than anything, which is very, very confusing and hard to understand when you see what's happening up there. I'd be curious to your take on the post that Chris Marcus put out last week. And I've always admired Chris's ability to chase down the story from an investigative journalistic standpoint. He's one of the best in this space. And he was talking about the fact that when you have large short positions on COMEX, that they're supposed to typically be offset with long positions in London. And he was framing it with the respect that if indeed the second largest ever in the history of the COMEX by the commercial banks that we see right now, if indeed it really is offset in London, where we're told they have somewhere in the neighborhood of a 250 million ounce float, if they're offset, he was saying that means there's only 7 million ounces in London that is not encumbered, something to that extent. And if it's not offset, if it's not hedged in London, that means a bank like Bank of America, typically something like that. According to Ted Butler, when he was alive, he would have said it would be Bank of America. But that means that there are banks or a bank wickedly exposed to a rise. And maybe that's why we've seen on Wednesday of last week, 487 million ounces on paper traded. And on Friday, 356 million ounces. They are trying, by trading 800 million ounces over 2 days, to keep the price below $37 for sure. But I'm curious to your take on that. Do you think that what Chris is saying has some validity? Well, and it's funny, and although they didn't speak directly to silver, although I would argue the silver is the exact same thing. In fact, on steroids, the ECB warned that gold is a threat to the global financial system. I'll just read something to you real quick. I'm sure you saw this. Last month, the ECB, the European Central Bank, warned of increasing counterparty risk in gold derivatives for the euro area. In the May edition of the Financial Stability Review, the ECB added that a significant share of these gold derivatives were over the counter and not centrally cleared, leaving actors exposed to counterparty risk. The LBMA is not an exchange, it's an over the counter system, I guess called. The big point to take on board is an official recognition that the stand for delivery obligations on COMEX are behind the crisis. And they continue. Since November, warehouse stock has shown 26,470,000 ounces have stood for delivery. Eurozone banks have swapped gold for paper, and the gold is disappearing in deliveries. Behind the ECB's public concern is a far deeper one. It is as close as we can get to official warning that the gold paper game is coming to a very nasty end, likely to drive gold measured in paper currencies far, far higher. And incidentally, the same problem exists in silver, but without the central bank participation, more of a commercial bank, which means it's an existential threat to some of these banks if the shit hits the fan. That's in essence what you were saying, correct? Now you have Singapore getting into the game and opening up a market, a gold market. They want pricing authority to shift towards Asia. And I think that's what is happening, whether it be with the Shanghai Metals Exchange, now an exchange that's being developed in Singapore, the BRICS exchange. There's no question that I think they've realized for a very long time that the pricing power, the West monopoly on metals pricing and settlement, is something that they realize is a scam. And I think that buyers in Asia aren't just looking for better pricing. They're seeking autonomy. They're seeking the ability to set the prices. This is a big deal that I think people are missing. And even when the BRICS grain exchange was developed last year, the guy that is behind it said, we in the global South produce and consume more grain than the West does, but we can't control the price. It's done on COMEX. But with the development of this grain exchange, that will change. And that's one of the scary things about the recklessness of the Western policies that are allowing the exchanges to be drained and flowing eastward to countries like India, countries like China, countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia, and all of the countries that understand what silver represents, standing for delivery. And maybe by the grace of God, someone in the Trump administration said, look, we've got to do the same thing here or we're in big trouble, hence all of the deliveries we're seeing. You had me on your show, but I'll ask you, I mean, when do we see the price suppression end? What does it take for this to be overwhelmed, for these banks to realize that this isn't just stupid, it's an existential threat to their survival? Are we getting there? Are we almost there? That's the part I hope people can understand, that it's not always price that is the determining factor. Do you see us waking up one morning? In other words, instead of it being a slow drip like we've seen it now move up, 32, 33, et cetera, 34, or do we wake up one morning and it's 50 or 60 or 70 or 80 or whatever that number is? Do you see that happening? You get the mainstream media's borderline compulsive deception. And what I'm going to say here is fact, and it's not conjecture, and it's not inflammatory at all. I just think I think of the world that you and I grew up in. We're very close to the same age. I'll read you one paragraph, get your take on this. To your point, earlier this week, ABC journalist Jory Rand sought to reframe the escalating violence on the streets of LA, even as his own channel broadcasts images of cars completely engulfed in flames, the thick black smoke billowing into the night air. Noting there that there was a large group of people running wild, Rand said. It could turn very volatile if you move law enforcement in there the wrong way and turn what is just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn into a massive confrontation and acceleration between officers and demonstrators. Now, that's how the media portrays this. Just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn. But if you bring in law enforcement, well, it could turn violent. You can't make this stuff up, and it's very difficult. And that's why people aren't aware of the things that you and I talk about, the things that are so logical to us and to your listeners, because they're being gaslit by a media that would go as far as saying it's a peaceful protest and just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn. But if you bring in law enforcement, watch out, it's going to get violent. Now, I don't understand that, and I have a hard time even saying it and rationalizing it, but that's the world we find ourselves living in, somehow, some way that we're able to look back at this and say, how did we ever get here? Thank God we found a way out of it. Sometimes I wonder, after watching all the chaos we've seen the last several days, it's as if they are trying to, I mean, you could argue they've been the model of inefficiency for a long time. They're trying to perhaps just get the littlest amount of silver, like your interview, the interview that you did that I think everyone needs to listen to, the 2-part interview or 3-part interview, Jack Sermon, I think his name was. And it's one of the 2 go-to interviews that I would tell anyone who wants to know what's going on to listen to. And in it, when he said, I was told by my superiors to only produce just enough silver eagles to not create a backlash, what am I trying to say? A media backlash or something that we're going to have to try and quell. Well, that's obviously what they're doing. And because everything else premium wise has reacted far differently than the American Eagles, which have maintained their high premium, but higher than everything else, simply because the demand or the supply is not meeting demand. And which is weird because there's plenty of product on everything else, but Silver Eagles have really been that one item that has maintained demand, but the supply just isn't where we would expect it to be. I don't know. I guess I take a lot from that interview that you did with Jack, and I never thought I would hear a Mint official say he was told by his superiors, and I don't know who those superiors would be. I doubt it would have been the lady that used to run it, the HR lady. I forget her name, but whatever, Gibson. But I think it would be more along the lines of the Treasury Secretary who would have given him those instructions. But yeah, there's no question, really. I mean, look, they haven't even made a platinum eagle yet this year, and you can see that they're very, very inefficient. But it's almost as if maybe they are restocking the American government, perhaps, and using stupid excuses and lack of transparency and the admission by Jack that, just make as little as possible without creating a backlash, imports and deliveries into the United States, that we have allowed this to become a very detrimental situation to the safety of the country, that we are woefully understocked in things like gold and silver. And that's why they're delivering it into the system. Maybe it is the Treasury that is behind all of these big deliveries. And on one hand, we can't make the admission that we're woefully underprepared for the future as it pertains to something as strategic, not just industrial, but strategic as silver to the American public. So, I mean, that would be the only thing that would make sense to me, Vix. I can't think of any other reason why they would go to such great lengths to keep Silver Eagles from the public when it's in the law, the charter of the mint, that they're supposed to produce as many as is demanded by the public, which they clearly haven't for the better part of 5 years. I would say it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.50 or 60 cents, right in that neighborhood over spot. And this is where it gets crazy, because when they run out of product, as they've shown the propensity to do continuously, and the primary distributors have it all, this is where the markup becomes absurd. Buy and sell. It's not at my level. It's at the level one above me, the primary distributors. We're an authorized reseller, which is one step below the primary distributors. They're the ones who will spend 50, 60, $70 million indiscriminately on this stuff, on Silver Eagles. Take everything that they can give on allocation. They all do that. So the mint's now out of product. And in essence, they then become the market makers and control the price. So I want to say the mint charges between $2.40 and $2.60, somewhere in that neighborhood, I would think, to the primary distributors right now over spot. Yeah, they can sell a third the silver and make the same amount as selling it all in Eagles.
So they're gouging, they're price gouging.
It reminds me of the cop that I saw in the gas station not too long ago, around dusk, and one of his lights was out, his headlights. I said, sir, your headlights. I said, good thing I won't get pulled over. I laughed and he laughed, but it's true. It's like, who's going to do anything about it, I guess is the question. I think that's how brazen this has all become. But yeah, to your point, Vix, on everything, there's far greater demand up top, but you can see it. You can see it through the massive purchases, the massive deliveries, and then the repatriation, whether it be taking it off the exchanges or central banks bringing it home, removing counterparty risk. And to your point, yes, the demand is still pretty good on the retail level in comparison to where it was most of the time that I've known you over the last 20 plus years. But by the same token, it represents such a tiny, tiny bit of the mainstream realized it yet. They really haven't. And so, yeah, what is very available and flush right now can very quickly change. We've seen that happen. Silicon Valley Bank failed. We added 14,000 clients in 45 days. That's 4 years worth of client acquisition in 45 days. But, that's really the kind of environment we find ourselves in, where the public isn't thinking, they're not forward thinking, they're not looking at this. They think the road to retirement is paved with stock certificates and mutual funds, which, to my point earlier, you have a record participation by the public in equities right now. At the same time, record accumulation on physical metals by the insiders. And so they flip-flop. The insiders are out in equities and in commodities, and the retail public is all in equities and really pretty much out as it pertains to commodities, at least on a large scale. So what does that portray for the future? Well, I'll leave that up to everyone else to decide. But, we need people like you to keep giving us this information, the facts, the figures, and being there to hold all of our hands, because it is tough. It's tough for a lot of people to see the counterintuitive nature. What we see today, where oil was way down, the dollar was up, gold and silver, last I looked, in the middle of this escalation in the Middle East, and gold's down $35, silver's up 4 cents. But things are counterintuitive to the way we would think it would be to react in terms of reaction. But that's all done as part of the gaslighting, as part of the cartel 101 playbook. I, for one, thank God every day for people like you who are making my job a little bit easier to try and get the information out, because you're right. These are challenging times for most people, and harder yet, the mainstream media doesn't do anything to open people's eyes to what is happening. So that's why we need you and others like you and me to continue to, scream. I don't know how many people are listening, but I hope enough to, if we help just a couple, that to me is great. And I'll continue to do it. And I love coming on your show, and I'll continue to come on whenever you ask me, because people like you that I've been following forever, that has motivated me to do what I do. Yeah, we have a new studio. I showed it to you. It's done. They're putting the finishing touches on it. By next week, we're going to do our first show. I have a lot of new announcements I told you about. I can't tell the public about it until next week. The best way to reach us is to send us an email, and in the subject line, say Bix sent me, to info at milesfranklin.com. We will send you our price list, where our prices will be as good or better than anyone in America. Things like 365 silver, which I know you like, right now 99 cents over spot. It's as good of a deal as anything in the industry, anything. Available for immediate delivery, and everything we have right now is flush, and we're choking on supply, to be honest with you, for the first time in quite some time. So you want prices or questions on anything that you've seen on this show or anything else, IRAs, anything, info at Miles Franklin, no obligation. If you want to be contacted, put it in there, put your phone number down, we'll call you. If you don't, you can say, don't want to be contacted, just want to see the price list. We respect people's privacy, but info at Miles Franklin is the best way. One of these days, you and I will sit down and I will explain to everyone why I don't publish my prices really extensively, the way that I do on this sheet that they just have to request. And there are reasons behind it. It allows us to be very competitive. So info@Miles Franklin, price sheet, any questions, sent me in the subject line would be very helpful. And we'll make sure and roll out the red carpet for your listeners as always, and make sure that they don't become that first customer complaint that we've never had in 35 years. We charge no commission on the buyback. We'll guarantee the highest bid price in the country. We'll make something on the silver side. The only thing that really, in my mind, is of consideration is taxes at these higher levels. When you sell gold, paying your capital gains. If it's in an IRA, that's the sweet spot because you can trade it, no taxes, get the silver, no storage requirements. And then the key to the precious metals IRA is the ability to, if you wish, take delivery of the metal. Down the road, it is a taxable event. If you're over 59 and a half, you can say, send me all my silver, and they'll send it to you. You'll pay taxes if you cashed out your IRA. But whether it be in an IRA or in your personal holdings, we will help you. We'll help you with insured shipment. We'll answer all your questions, no obligation. That would be our privilege. And yeah, you're right. It is the perfect time to do the gold to silver swap, at least from a historical standpoint. It's screaming. So yeah, we're very adept at that and can help from start to finish, make it as easy as can be.